This is Mike with Citybeats, DJ and Music Production School. Here's a little tip on warping entire tracks inside of Ableton. This is, we have to do this to DJ inside of Ableton. It just, some tracks, they're going to come in warped pretty well, but, there's always a little bit of, it kind of skews off the timeline a little bit. So what we need to do is place a couple of warp markers, throughout our track and just making it right on time so that when we mix two tracks together, we're not going to have a problem with the beats being off or anything like that. So, when we first bring in a track, I'll show you this one here. Most of the time when you load a track in Ableton, it will look like this with all the warp markers. And sometimes Ableton, yeah, it does do a good job, but, sometimes it doesn't. So, and you don't really need all of those warp markers in there. You might need a few. So what I like to do is, I highlight everything there with the orange. That could be done with Command A. So now it's highlighted, and then we hit delete. And that's going to delete all of our warp markers except for the first one. So, okay, and that was that. So, basically I already did that to this track. So I erased all the warp markers. And, we're going to go ahead and warp this track. So there's always a couple of steps that we take that are constant. First thing I do is I'm going to find the very, very beginning of the track here. And Ableton almost does it for us, but, they still didn't put it right here on the, right here. That's the very, very beginning of the track. So we want our first warp marker to be there. It's a little bit off. So I'm here. So we create the warp marker by just double-clicking. And Ableton gives you the little transients. You see here? They kind of tell you where something's happening. And they're pretty good, It's called the transient marker here. That's just something, it's just Ableton telling you that something's happening there, but you didn't do anything to it, though. So we're not doing anything until we actually press down the warp marker like that. So, on, off, so now it's on. So now I want to make this the very beginning of the track. So I right-click, set 1-1 here. So now that's the very beginning of my track. Let's make the loop equal to it. So now the start of my track is right there at the first kick. And that's exactly where we want it to be. And then we're also going to do one more step here. So it was set 1-1 here was the first one. And then we'll go back to it again and warp from here straight. And when we do that, it should start warping the track pretty good. So for the most part, usually the first 16 to 32 bars right now are going to probably be pretty good. So I'm just scrolling back out. And we can also look at it and we can also listen to it with the metronome. My metronome is located up here. And that's basically just a metronome, counting off a beat and telling us if we're in sync, with the beats per measure. And if we're not, we'll hear it. And you can also see it. So let's start the track here. And let's start my metronome. You see they're kind of hitting both, right on top of each other, which is what we want. So now if we go and look at it, and we could scroll along here, and you see here that the kicks are where they're supposed to be, on every bar, the sixth bar here. If it was something like this, that's no good. That's when we would move it. But right now it's good. It's on the 6. So let's scroll down. So let's go a little further into the track here. Now, when we talk about being on time, so now we started at 1-1. So just remember that our kicks are 4 beats per measure here. You know, depending on what you're warping, usually there's going to be a constant, something like that. So, you know, we know at every every time the bar comes around, it should be in sync. So I'm talking about, you know, bar 17, bar 18, bar 19. You know, these are where the kicks should be, you know, when we set the 1-1 that way, just so we know everything is equal. So if it starts to veer off in any direction, we're going to bring it back to it either way. And that's kind of what warping is, you know, moving the beat or the music in the perfect time. Okay? Sounds pretty good here. So let's go forward here and listen a little more. Again, my kick and my metronome are they're dead on. So let me just show you what it sounds like if it's not. You hear how there's a little skip delay in it? Let's do it put it here, right? That's not right. So you can see how the metronome and the beat were very off. So let me just get rid of that. Command Z, go back to normal. Now let's listen to it again. So my metronome and my kick, you know, they're right on. So you see the differences. So, and, you know, sometimes it's not going to be that apparent. Sometimes, you know, the beat just goes off a tiny bit. But when you're mixing 2 kicks together and you're trying to have some very dead-on mixes, and you're trying to mix multiple tracks and stuff like that inside of Ableton, you don't want to have to worry about whether or not this track is going to go off beat or something's going to happen. So, you know, what's good with this is, you know, with Tractor and the other ones and, Scratch and those ones, if we hit the turntable, something happens on the computer, it goes off beat, something happens. With Ableton, we can fix everything and we can make everything on beat. So let's just go a little bit forward here. Now this stuff looks pretty good here. So let's look at the 50. It's actually a tad bit off here. If you see right here, my transient is here. Right? So this is my transient. And this is the beginning of my kick right here. So I always want it to be on 53. So see what I mean? It's a little before. So if we don't fix these little tiny parts now, at the end of the track when we're going to be mixing it the most, it's going to be off and it's going to sound bad. So right now, I'm going to put my warp marker here. Actually, I'm going to open it up even more and make it dead on. Ready? This is the beginning of my kick right here. You see it? This guy here. So let's make the warp marker here. Move him over. And close it back up. And scroll out. So, now let's listen to it here with the metronome. You know, when you have a dead-on mix and you warp it very good, you know, if the metronome should almost be hidden behind the beat. It should be right on the kick, you know. So that's how you know you're doing it right. So right there is, you know, that's pretty good. So now I'm going to go forward a little bit and just see if it's starting to skew off any bit. Remember, let's look at the main numbers, 68, 69. And that's pretty good right there. Let's look at this one now. So see where my they put a transient back here, but this is the beginning of my kick. You see it right here? And it's right where I need it to be. I mean, if we scroll this down just a tad, you know, that's milliseconds right there. So, you know, you can argue that you might want to bring this back a tad, but I wouldn't even do that. That's just a little too much. I'm just showing you the very fine points. So let's just move on here. So now, Usually after a break, something happens here. So let's just put it here. Now, right there, I don't know if you guys can hear, but it's starting to lose itself. And I went up and I looked ahead here at about 57. And if we open it up, again, you see the kick is happening ever so slightly before the 157. So we want to open it up and put it right there. So let's grab it right here in the beginning and move it to 157. Now we close it back up. Now over here should be good. Ready? Yeah, that sounds way better. Okay, so, you know, you only need a couple. 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to have about 5 warp markers in this one. This one's a good example. Some of them aren't going to be this technical. Sometimes when you do the beginning and then you warp from here straight, sometimes it does most of the track and it just skews off at the end. So, you know, good places to check is always in the beginning, always in the middle somewhere after after a breakdown where it comes back in. There might have been a little time lost or shrunk there. And also at the end of your tracks, you always want them to be warped good because that's where you're mixing over here. So let's look here. Let's see at the 80, 88. It's a little bit off. Okay. Now let's just go over here. I'm just going to do a couple of warp markers and then we'll go back and listen to it. This is the very end here. Let's go to an even number. Got 230 here. And that's pretty spot on right there. But it could be moved a tad. You see where I'm talking about? That's your kick. So now let's just listen to it through. And that is your Warping 101. Fairly simple. Needs to be done to pretty much every track. Works real good with the the 4/4 time signature. 4 beats per measure. So that's pretty much it. Again, this was Mike Ingenito with Citybeats, nyc.com. Citybeats DJ Music Production School. We got video tutorials, we got classes, information, parties. Contact us, citybeats, nyc.com. Thanks.